Chapter 20 of The Dust Flower by Basil King. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Simon Evers. Chapter 20. It was May. In spite of her conviction that she knew what to do and how to do it, Barbara perceived that at the end of 7 months they were much where they had been in the previous October. If there was a change, it was that all three, Rashleigh, Letty, and herself, had grown strained and intense. Outwardly they strove to maintain a semblance of friendship. For that Barbara had worked hard, and in a measure had succeeded. She had held Rash, she had won Letty. She had more than won Letty, she had trained her. All that in 7 months a woman of the world could do for an unformed and ignorant child, she had done. Her experience at Bleary Street had helped her in this, and Letty had been quick. She had seized not only those small points of speech and action foundational to rising in the world, but the point of view of those who had risen. She knew how, Barbara was sure, that there were certain things impossible to people such as those among whom she had been thrown. Since it was May, it was the end of a season, and the minute Barbara had long ago chosen for a masterstroke. Each of the others felt the crisis as near as she did herself. "It's got to end," Letty confessed to her, as amid the soft loveliness of springtime they were again driving in the park. Barbara chose her words. "I suppose he feels that too." "Then why don't he let me end it?" "I fancy that that's a difficult position for a man. If you ask his permission beforehand, he feels obliged to say—" "And perhaps," Letty suggested, "he's too tender-hearted." "That's part of it. He is tender-hearted. Besides that, his position is grotesque. A man with whom 2 women are in love. To one of them he's been nominally married, while to the other he's bound by every tie of honour. No wonder he doesn't see his way. If he moves towards the one, he hurts the other. A man to whom it's agony to hurt a fly." "Does the other girl still feel the way she did?" "Oh, she's killing herself. She's breaking her heart. Nobody knows it but him and her, and even he doesn't take it in. But she is." "I suppose she thinks I'm something awful." "Does it matter to you what she thinks?" "I don't want her to hate me." "Oh, I shouldn't say she did that. She feels that, considering everything, you might have acted with more decision." "But he won't let me." "And he never will if you wait for that." "Then what do you think I ought to do?" "That's where I find you weak, Letty, since you ask me the question. No one can tell you what to do, and he least of all. It's a situation in which one of you must withdraw, either you or the other girl. But don't you see, he can't say so to either." "And if one of us must withdraw, you think it should be me?" "I have to leave that to you. You're the one who butted in. I know it wasn't your fault, that the fault was his entirely, but we recognise the fact that he's—how shall I put it—not quite responsible. We women have to take the burden of the thing on ourselves, if it's ever to be put right." In her corner of the car, Letty thought this over. The impression on her mind was the deeper, since, for several months past, she had watched the prince growing more and more unhappy. He was less nervous than he used to be, less excitable, and for that he had told her the credit was due to herself. "You soothe me," he once said to her, in words she would always treasure. And yet, as his irritability decreased, his unhappiness seemed to grow. She could only infer that he was mourning over the girl to whom he was engaged, and on whom he had inflicted a great wrong. For the last few weeks Letty's mind had occupied itself with her almost more than with the prince himself. "Do you think I shall ever see her?" she asked suddenly now. Barbara reflected. "I think you could if you wanted to." "Should you arrange it?" "I could." "You're sure she'd be willing to see me?" "Yes, I know she would." "When could you do it?" "Whenever you like." "Soon?" "Yes, sooner perhaps than—" Barbara spoke absently, as if a new idea was taking possession of her mind. "Sooner perhaps than you think." "And you say she's breaking her heart?" "A little more, and it will be broken." By the time Letty had been set down at the door in East 67th Street, the afternoon had grown chilly. In the back drawing-room Steptoe was on his knees lighting the fire. Letty came and stood behind him. Without preliminary of any kind, she said quietly, "Steptoe, it's got to end." Expecting a protest, she was surprised that he should merely blow on the shivering flame, saying, in the interval between two long breaths, "I agrees with madam." "And it's me that must end it." He blew gently again. "I guess that'd be so too." She thought of the little mermaid leaping into the sea and trembling away into foam. If he wants to marry the girl he's in love with, he'll never do it the way we're living now. He rose from his knees, dusting one hand against the other. "Madam's quite right. He won't. Not never." She threw out her arms and moaned, "Oh, no, Steptoe, I'm so tired of it." "Madam's tired of living here and doing nothing and just watching and waiting and nothing never happening." "Does madam remember that I, when she first come, I said there was two reasons why I wanted to make her into a lady?" Letty nodded. "The one I told her was that I wanted to help someone who was like what I used to be myself." "I remember." "And the other, what I didn't tell madam, I'll tell her now. It was I was hoping that a woman had come into my poor boy's life as 'ud comfort him like." "And she didn't come?" "He ain't seen that she's come. I said it'd be a tough job to bring him to falling in love with her like, but it's been tougher than what I thought it'd be." "So that I must do something." "Looks as if madam would have to." "I suppose you know that there's an easy way for me to do it?" "Nothing ain't so very easy, but if madam has a big enough reason." She felt the necessity of being plain. "I suppose that if he hadn't picked me up in the park that day, I'd have gone to the bad anyhow." "If madam's thinking about going to the bad—" She threw up her head defiantly. "Well, I am. What of it?" "I was just thinking as I might help her a bit about that." She was puzzled. "I don't think you know what I said. I said I was—" "Going to the bad, madam. That's what I understood. But madam won't find it so easy, not having had no experience like, as you might say." "I didn't know you needed experience for that." "All good people thinks that way, madam. But when you tackle it deliberate like, there's quite a trick to it." "And do you know the trick?" was all she could think of saying. "I may not know the very identical trick madam would be in want of, being a lady, as you might say, but I could put her in the way of finding out." "You don't think I could find out for myself?" "You see, it's like this. I used to know a young man what everything went again him, and one day he started out for to be a forger like, so as he'd be put in jail and be took care of, board and lodging free and all that. Well, out he starts, and not knowing the little ins and outs, as you might say, everything went agin him, just as it done before. And would madam believe it, that young man, he's ended up studying for the ministry. Madam wouldn't want to make a mistake like that, now would she?" Letty turned this over in her mind. A career parallel to that of this young man would affect none of the results she was aiming at. "Then what would you suggest?" she asked at last. "I could give madam the address of a lady, an awful wicked lady that she is, what 'll put madam up to all the ropes. If madam was to go out into the cold world like, this lady'd give her a home. Besides, the address I'd give madam a sign like, so as the lady'd know it was something special." "A sign? I don't know what you mean." "It'd be this, madam." He drew from his pocket a small silver thimble. "This'd be a password to the lady. The minute she'd see it, she'd know that the time had come." "What time?" "That's something madam would find out. I couldn't explain it beforehand." "Sounds very queer." "It'd be very queer. Going to the bad is always queer. Madam wouldn't look for it to be like having a gentleman lead her into dinner." "What's she like, the lady?" "And that's something madam have to wait and see. She wouldn't seem so wicked, not at first sight, as you might say, but time 'ud tell. If madam be patient, well, I wouldn't like to say." He eyed the fire. "I think that fire'll burn now, madam, and if it don't, madam'll only have to ring." He was at the door when Letty, feeling the end of all things to be at hand, ran after him, laying her fingers on his sleeve. "Oh, Steptoe, you've been so good to me." He relaxed from his dignity sufficiently to let his hand rest on hers, which he patted gently. "I've been Madam's servant, and my boy's." "I shall never think of you as a servant, never." The frosty colour rose into his cheeks. "Then Madam will do me a great wrong." "To me you're so much higher than a servant." "Madam will find that there ain't nothing higher than a servant. There's a lot about service in the pipers nowadays, crackied up like. But nobody don't seem to remember that servants knows more about them than what other people do, and servants don't remember it theirselves. So long as I can serve Madam, just as I've served me boy." "Oh, but Steptoe, I shall have gone to the bad." "That'll be all the same to me, Madam. At my time of life I don't see no difference between them as has gone to the bad and them as has gone to the good, as you might say. I only sees people." Let alone, Letty went back to the fire and stood gazing down at it, her foot on the fender. So it was the end. Even Steptoe said so. In a sense she was relieved. She was relieved at the prospect of being freed from her daily torture. The little mermaid walking on blades in the palace of the prince, and forever dumb, had known bliss, but bliss so akin to anguish that her heart was consumed by it. The very fact that the prince himself suffered from the indefinable misery which her presence seems to bring made escape the more enticing. She was so buried in this reflection as to have heard no sound in the house when Steptoe announced in his stately voice, "Miss Barbara Walbrook." Having parted from this lady half an hour earlier, Letty turned in some surprise. "I've come back again," was the explanation sent down the long room. "Don't let William bring in tea," the imperious voice commanded Steptoe. "We wish to be alone." There was the same abruptness as she halted within 2 or 3 of where Letty stood, supporting herself with a hand on the edge of the mantelpiece. "I've come back to tell you something. I made up my mind to do it all at once, after I left you a few minutes ago. Now that I've done it, I feel easier." Letty didn't know what was uppermost in her mind, curiosity or fear. What is it?" she asked, trembling. "I've given up the fight. I'm out of it." Letty crept forward. You've done what?" "I told you in the park that one or the other of us would have to withdraw." "One or the other of us?" "Exactly, and I've done it." With horror in her face and eyes, Letty crept nearer still. But I don't understand." "Oh, yes, you do. How can you help understanding? You must have seen all along that—" "Not that you were the other girl? Oh, not that." "Yes, that, of course. Why not?" Because I couldn't bear it." "You can bear it if I can, can't you? If I have to bear it all these weeks and months." "Yes, but that's—" She covered her face with her hands. "That's what makes it so terrible." "Of course it makes it terrible, but it isn't as terrible now as it was. To you, anyhow." "But why do you withdraw when you love him and he loves you?" "I do it because I want to throw all the cards on the table. It's what my common sense has been telling me to do all along, only I never worked round to it till we had our talk this afternoon. Now I see—" "What do you see, Miss Walbrook?" "I see that we've got to give him a clean sheet, or he'll never know where he is. He can't decide between us because he's in an impossible position. We'll have to set him absolutely free so that he may begin again. I'll do it on my side. You can do what you like." She went as abruptly as she came, leaving Letty clearer than ever as to her new course. By midnight she was ready. In the back spare room she waited only to be sure that all in the house were asleep. She had heard Allerton come in about 9:30, and the whispering of voices told that Steptoe was making his explanations, that she was out of sorts, had dined in her room, and begged not to be disturbed. At about 10:30 she heard the prince go upstairs to his own room, though she fancied that outside her door he had paused for a second to listen. That was the culminating minute of her self-repression. Once it was over, and he had gone on his way, she knew the rest would be easier. By midnight she had only to wait quietly. In the old grey rag and the battered black hat, she surveyed herself without emotion. Since making her last attempt to escape, her relation to all these things had changed. They had become less significant, less important. The emblems of the higher life, which in the previous autumn she had buried with ritual and regret, she now packed away in the closet with hardly a second thought. The old grey rag which had then seemed the livery of a degraded life was now no more than the resumption of her reality. "I'll go as I came," she had been saying to herself all the evening. "I know he'd like me to take the things he'd given me, but I'd rather be just what I was." If there was any ritual in what she had done since Miss Walbrook had left her, it was in the putting away of small things by which she didn't want to be haunted. "I couldn't do it with this on," she said of the plain gold band on her finger, to which, as a symbol of marriage, she had never attached significance in any case. She took it off, therefore, and laid it on the dressing-table. "I couldn't do it with this in my pocket," she said of the purse containing a few dollars with which Steptoe had kept her supplied. This too she laid on the dressing-table, becoming as penniless as when Judson Flack had put her out of doors. Somehow, to be penniless seemed to her an element in her new task, and an excuse for it. Since Allerton had never made her a present, there was nothing of this kind to discard. It had been part of his non-committal, impersonal attitude toward her that he had never given her a concrete sign that she meant anything to him whatever. He had thanked her on occasions for the comforting quality he found in her presence. He had, in so many words, recognized the fact that when he got into a tantrum of nerves, she could bring him out of it as no one else had ever done. He had also imparted to her the discovery that in reading to her, and trying to show her the point of view of a life superior to her own, he had, for the first time in his life, done something for someone else. But he had never gone beyond all this, or allowed her to think that his heart was not given to the girl he was engaged to. In that at least he had been loyal to the mysterious princess, as the little mermaid could not but see. She was not consciously denuded, as she would have felt herself 6 months earlier. As to that, she was not thinking anything at all. Her motive in setting free the prince from the drag on him which she now recognized herself to be, filled all her mental horizons. So dominated was she by this overwhelming impulse as to have no thought even for self-pity. When a clock somewhere struck 1, she took it as the summons. From the dressing-table she picked up the scrawl in Steptoe's hand, giving the name of Miss Henrietta Tull, at an address at Red Point, L.I. She knew Red Point, on the tip of Long Island, as a distant, partially developed suburb of Brooklyn. In the previous year she had gone with half a dozen other girl supes from the Excelsior studio to blow in a quarter looking at the ocean steamers passing in and out. She had no intention of intruding on Miss Tull, but she couldn't hurt Steptoe's feelings by leaving the address behind her. For the same reason she took the silver thimble which stood on the scrap of paper. On its rim she read the inscription, H.T. from H.S. But she made no attempt to unravel the romance behind it. She merely slipped the scrawl and the thimble into the pocket of her jacket and stood up. She took no farewells. To do so would have unnerved her. On the landing outside her door she listened for a possible sound of the prince's breathing, but the house was still. In the lower hall she resisted the impulse to slip into the library and kiss the place where she had kissed his feet on the memorable morning when her hand had been on his brow. "That won't help me any," were the prosaic words with which she put the suggestion away from her. If the little mermaid was to leap over the ship's side and dissolve into foam, the best thing she could do was to leap. The door no longer held secrets. She had locked it and unlocked it 1,000 times. Feeling for the chain in the darkness, she slipped it out of its socket. She drew back the bolt. She turned the key. Her fingers found the 2 little brass knobs, pressing this one that way, and that one this way. The door rolled softly as she turned the handle. Over the threshold she passed into a world of silence, darkness, electricity, and stars. She closed the door noiselessly. She went down the steps. End of chapter 20.